now it is time to create our first action for the Redux store. So what will we do to create the action? We have just created the comment form in the assignment that you just completed, the third assignment. In this exercise, we are going to create our first action whereby the comment that you submit will be added into the list of comments for our application. So we will modify by introducing a new action for our application, which will take the comment and then add it into the comments field. So this requires us to change the state of our application. So we need an action that enables us to change the state of our application in the Redux store. Going to the project, the first step that we will do is to create an action types file here in the Redux folder. So going into the Redux folder, we'll create a file named action types.js. And here we will define the various action types by using string constants. Now, this is the standard approach for implementing the Redux actions and the action creators. So I'm showing you the standardized template. For the simple application that we are doing, we may not need this elaborate arrangement, but it is better to follow a standardized pattern for doing things, or a standardized structure for how we create the various files, so that this can be used for even large scale applications. So in the action types, let's create our first action type. So we will export a constant called add comment, as you might have expected, and this is exporting a string of the type add comment. Now, this is an easy way. So when you have several action types, we will follow the exact pattern and then define all the action types using the same pattern here. So we'll export multiple constants, each of which is a string constant that specifies the corresponding action. And when you define it like this, then you can import these action types into the reducer functions and then use that to do the matching in the switch statement that you use there. So that's the reason for creating the action types file here. Now, to create action creators, we'll create a file named action creators.js file. So in the action creators.js file, we will import everything that is being exported from the action types file here. So we are using again ES6 imports here. So you're saying import everything there, all the exports from there as action types in this. So this is again a standardized way of importing all the action types into our action creators. Now, from here, let's export a function called add comment. Now, what is this add comment? This is a function that creates an action object. So how do you create an action object? So this add comment will take in 4 parameters: dish ID, rating, author, and then comment. So this is the data that will be included in the action object that is going to be created by this function and returned. So in here, we'll go ahead and create this. So that's it. So this is, as you can see, an arrow function which has 4 parameters and then will return whatever we create here. So as you can see, it is going to return a JavaScript object, so plain JS object, which is what the action has to be. So inside this JavaScript object, the first thing that we will define is the type, as you would expect. So every action object should contain a type. So how do we define the type? This is where we will use the action types and then add comment here. So now you see the reason for defining the action types in a separate file and then importing it in here, and then you can easily define the type to be those. All the types of actions are all captured in the action types there, and then you can import it in there. So, and these action types can be imported into the reducer functions files and then made use of there also. That's one part. Now, I will follow a standard pattern and then define the second part as the payload. The payload contains whatever needs to be carried in, so the data that is sent back by the add comment. This is just my way of defining it, and it is a very natural way of specifying whatever data needs to be carried in the action object to the reducer function here. So what is the payload going to contain? It will contain the dish ID, which is the dish ID that I receive as the parameter. It will contain the rating. It will contain the author, and then the comment. So these four parameters that this function receives, I'm going to map them into four properties inside my payload object here. And that's it. So now our action object is ready to be returned by this action creator here. So it has the type and then the payload here. So this is a standardized way that we can define an action type. So makes it more straightforward to deal with it. So now that we have defined an action type, now where do you send this action type to? You send this to the store. Now within the store, which part of the state should this be affecting? So when you look back at it, this is going to be sending in a comment, the various parts of the comment into my store. And so it should be changing just the comments part of the state there. So that's why in the comments.js file, this is where I'm going to receive the action and then act on it. The remaining ones, the dishes, the leaders, and the promotions, don't need to take any action when they receive that action. So they're just going to ignore that action type here. Now, in the comments, when I receive that action type, so even here, I'm going to import the action types just like I did in the action creators. So I'll import that here. And then here, this one is supposed to act on the action type. So we'll say action types add comment. So if the incoming action, the type property of that action matches this, then this reducer function is supposed to do something to the state. What is it supposed to do to the state? So when it receives the comment here, so we'll say var comment action payload. Remember that the payload was a JavaScript object which contained the various parts of the comment. And then what we will do is we'll say comment.id. Now I'm going to add in the comment ID here at this moment because I don't have any other place where I can generate the comment ID in any way. So I'm going to add in the comment ID here. Later on, when we add in a server, the server will supply the comment ID for us. So at that point, we'll come back and modify this. Now, how do I generate the comment ID? The comments will be comment ID will be going from 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So since our comments file already has several comments, the number of comments there can be obtained by just saying state.length. The state here is being the comments JavaScript object that we have imported from the share.comments there. So the comment ID, I will assign it to state.length here. Because this comments is a JavaScript array, and so when I look at the length of the array, when it contains a certain number of comments, the length of the array tells me how many comments there are, and then we are assigning the comment ID in sequential order. So the next comment that goes into the array should get the comment ID because the comment ID starts with 0, and so That's an easy way of figuring out the comment ID for our comment. Now also, along with the comment ID, I will assign a date field to that. So we will generate a date field. Recall how the comment object's structure is. You can go and take a look at that in the comments.js file in the shared folder, and then you will see that it also contains a date field there. That date field I will generate automatically based upon the current date. So we'll say date to ISO string, because you recall that the date is being stored as an ISO string in my comment object. So we'll say comment date to ISO string, and then we'll say return. Now remember, we cannot modify the state that has been sent in as the parameter. I can add to it if you want and then return the modified version, but I can't directly go and mutate that state. So I will use the concat function on an array that JavaScript supports. So when you say state.concat, what it does is it pushes in the new element into that array, but that will be a new object that will get created, and that new object I can return. That way, by state itself, I am not mutating in any way. I'm just concating to it. So the concat is an immutable operation on the state, and that will create a new object, and that object I can return from my function here. So we'll say state concat comment. So this way I will add in the comment into my set of comments and then return that value. Now, of course, what we are doing here is we are only adding it in memory. So when you restart your application, any comments that you add by filling in the forms will be lost completely. We are not persisting the changes in any way, but that question will come back to that in one of the later exercises. At this moment, this is all that we are doing. We will add it into the comments array, and then so the view will be able to show that comment. So that's the change. So now you see how we can implement a reducer function which will not change or mutate the state, but instead creates a new copy of the state and then returns that value from the reducer function here. So now my reducer part of the function, which manages the comment part of the state, has been updated. Now for the dishes, leaders, and promotions, as I said, when you receive an action of the type add comment, they don't have to do anything, so they will just ignore that. Only the comments part of the reducer will make the change and add the new comment into the comments array there. Now, having done this, how do we make use of this? To make use of this, we will go into the main component. So let's go to the main component, and in the main component, recall that we had already mapped the map state to props here. Now if you want to dispatch something, you'll have to map that to dispatch, map dispatch to props here. So how do we make use of that? So first things first, we will import the add comment action creator from Redux action creators, because we need this action creator function in order to obtain an action JavaScript object, which we can then dispatch to the store by saying calling store dispatch. So once we obtain that, then right here we will add in map dispatch to props. Now this map dispatch to props will receive the dispatch as one of the parameters here. And when it receives the dispatch, this dispatch is the dispatch function from our store that will receive it as a parameter. When you connect that at the bottom, then automatically this map dispatch to props will receive dispatch as the parameter. So when it receives that, then in here, what is this going to do? This will, I need to surround this with parenthesis here, and then in here we will define a add comment property here, which takes the dish ID, rating, author, comment as the 4 parameters. And then what does it do? Then it will dispatch. It will dispatch the action. How do we obtain the action? To obtain the action, we use the add comment action creator. Now the add comment action creator needs to be passed these 4 parameter values. So we'll just copy these 4 parameter values here. These 4 are passed as parameters to the add comment, and so that will dispatch. Now, what does this do? So as you see, this function call, where we are calling the action creator, will return the action object for adding a comment. That action object is then given as a parameter to the dispatch function here. So the dispatch function obtains that as a parameter, and that we are supplying as a function here, and this can be used within our component here. So now that we have specified that, then what we need to do is to supply that as a parameter to the connect here. So going down to the connect, we'll say map dispatch to props. So when you connect that, then those that we define in the map dispatch to props will become available. So this add comment function will become available within my main component. Now, how do we make use of it within the main component? So going into the main component, here we are supplying the dish and the comments as the 2 attributes to the dish detail component. Now, along with these, I will pass in the 3rd attribute also, which is the add comment attribute, which would be this props add comment. That's it. So this function that you have just created will be passed in, this one will be passed in as an attribute to the dish detail component. So inside the dish detail component, then I can make use of this function to dispatch the action to my store. Because it's in the dish detail component that I have access to the comment that the user just submitted, right? So we will have to go into the dish detail component and then make use of these in there. So let's go to the dish detail component. And in the dish detail component, we'll walk down to the bottom here, and then as you implemented the dish detail component, you would recall that we were supplying for the render comments, we were supplying the comments here. And so we will also supply 2 more attributes to the comments here. The 2 more attributes are add comment, which came in as a parameter to this. So we'll say props add comment. It came in as props to the dish detail component. And then one more that I will pass in is the dish ID, because the comments itself doesn't know the ID of the dish for which the comments are being rendered. So I will pass in the dish ID as props.dish.id, because we will need that in the function there. So 2 more will be passed into the render comments function there. So going to the render comments function here. So in the render comments function, along with the comments, you will also receive the add comment and then the dish ID. 2 more in the props for the render comments. So add comments and dish ID. Now, what do we do with these two? We just need to pass these two directly to the comment form. So where we use the comment form, we'll pass the two to the comment form there. So we'll say dish ID is dish ID, and then add comment is add comment. Now, these have been the dish ID and the add comment. These two have been extracted already from the props, so they are available to us here. So we'll pass them to the comment form component that you have implemented as part of your previous assignment. So going into the comments form component, without showing you the details of how I implemented it, in the comments form component, what I'm going to do is, instead of popping up these as an alert, I will simply say this props add comment, this props dish ID, and then values.rating. Recall that the values is supplied as the parameter to the handle submit, and then we saw the structure of the values there. So values.rating, values.author. So recall that the add comment takes 4 parameters: dish ID, rating, author, and comment. So these 4 will be passed in as the parameters to the add comment function there. With this, when you submit a comment, you will see that the comment gets added into the list of comments for that particular dish. Having made all the changes, let's save all the changes and then go and take a look at our application. Going to the browser, let's go to the menu and then go to a specific dish. And then let's now click on the submit comment. And then this modal pops up. Let me select a rating value, and then I'll just type in a rating value here and a comment here, and then submit the comment. And then when I do that, you will immediately notice that the new comment has joined the list of comments for this dish here. So you'll say this is a test comment, and then you can also see that the date and my name have been rendered here. So that is the effect of the change that you have made to your application. So when you submit the comment, you see that the submission of the comment will trigger a action to be sent to your Redux store, and then this action will result in the comment being added into the comments part of the state of your Redux store. And then when that changes, then that will result in the store emitting a change, and that will result in in your main component going and getting the updated state from the Redux store, and then the main component passes the new state to all the child components. And then when you come down, the render comments component realizes that the comments part has changed, so it will have to be re-rendered. So React takes care of re-rendering that with the new comment added into place there. So now you see how an action can trigger a change in the Redux store, and that immediately gets reflected back into our React applications view there. With this, we complete this exercise where we have examined our first Redux action. This is a good time for you to do a git commit with the message Redux actions.